Hey family, how you doing? Welcome again to another video. And as always, we're so glad to have you. We just continue to rolling right along with these history or historic or history-based videos. And so quite exciting stuff that we're coming across. And man, I'm sure many of you, and I've been getting messages and emails from people, and so they say, keep going. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So thank you so much, as always, for your prayers and support. And we really do appreciate it. And this video is actually not going to be as long as the last one I did. I think it was. That one was quite lengthy because there was a lot. But what we're going to do is this is actually going to close out what we have been talking about as far as Juda. This is going to, I'm not going to say officially yet, because I'm sure that door is always going to remain open if we come across some additional information. But I think what we're going to see in this video here is going to kind of give us a little bit more information. And it's anything else is probably at this point after this video, as it relates to Juda, the kingdom of Juda, it's probably going to be a little bit redundant, I think. So that's why I just saw this and I was like, yeah, I think we'll just close it out on this. Now, the next video that we're going to be doing after this is that we're going to turn our eyes to Spain and Portugal. I have a lot of information that I can't wait to share with you, that really delves in deep in who these people are. We're going to be using a lot of these, one of the biggest mistakes that we have seen, and I know personally I've seen for so long in, I just say Hebrew land, is that what people will typically do is, I was looking on my desk to see if I can get an example or something, but I don't think I can demonstrate this. But basically, what typically people will do, if it's a video or, well, obviously videos, or if it's like a little image that someone posts on social media, they'll usually show you like a little clip, right? They'll show you like a little blurb of maybe it's an old book, right? That's typically what happens. And then it's like, there it is. There it is. That seals it for me. But the one thing about research, and again, I'm not an expert. I told you, I'm not an expert when it comes to research. Okay. But there are some things I've picked up along the way, and I've learned from other people and some of the best techniques when it comes to research. You never build a case based off of a little clip. You never want to do that because it doesn't tell you the whole story. This is why what we do here is that we try to give people the full context of what you're seeing. So there's one clip in particular. There's one excerpt that I've seen floating around for some time that people have used, and it's like, oh, this is it. This proves it. That's it. But I actually took the time. I took the time, and I not only looked at that clip, but I looked at the page before it and then some after it. And what it shows is, what it gives us is something a lot different. It paints a much different picture than what a lot of these, and like I said, Hebrew scholars, I'm shaking my head, because it's, anyway, people who really, I guess they're the image of great, I don't know. I don't want to go there, but you talk about taking things out of context. It's just really maddening, to see this. And like I said, all you have to do, family, is to search these people on social media, on YouTube, by their names, and you will find there are so many videos of people who've actually looked at their stuff and just completely picked it apart. I mean, if you're looking at it objectively, I mean, it's hard to deny the stuff that they're revealing, when it comes to this stuff. And in the video that we did, that recent video that we did, this is something that's sorely needed amongst our people when it comes to research, is having some type, I'm not saying it has to be appointed people per se to peer review things, because that would probably be a little more difficult if you're not in an educational frame or structure. We're dealing more with a community kind of thing. But there definitely needs to be some things in place where when you're talking about, because this is what we're doing. We're like trying to piece together those parts of our history that's been lost and stolen from us. And, we have to make sure that we're taking the time, not only taking the time to research it, but there has to be some level of checks and balances when it comes to this information. And like I said, I'll tell you straight up, I'm not saying I'm 100% right all the time. And I don't think anybody else out here could say that as well. The other point is that we also have to keep in mind, and this is another thing that I see that it just, I don't know, it gets lost. And, there's this belief that, let's say, for example, I do a video and I'm presenting historical facts and I'm sharing with you, these are historical facts. I mean, this is it. And then somebody else does a video and they're like, oh, yeah, well, I got facts here. And somehow in the mindset of some people, they believe that one set of historical fact can negate another set of historical facts. It doesn't work that way. And I've talked about that in that last video. It's almost like a puzzle. You have a set of pieces. I have a set of pieces. And our job, our responsibility, all of us collectively, rather if you're on YouTube or not, is to take that piece and find where that fits, not with any objective. The objective should be to come up with a complete picture. But what's happening is you have people who are wanting to kind of like, no, we're going to make this thing fit. And these pieces are important, but yours aren't, and that's not even being honest, family. That's literally not being honest when we're talking about doing research. Just as a real case scenario here, as you saw, like if you go into the community tab, I highlighted that. I talked about this in the last video, but for those who don't have the patience in watching the video, I put it in the community tab. As you know, we have been following. That's all we've been doing. Really, is putting our eyes closely on this historical claim about the pews in this church in Georgia, in Savannah, Georgia, to be exact. And it was alleged that on the side of those pews, it was Hebrew, but it was in Solitero. Hope I'm saying that right. It's a cursive form of Hebrew that was written there. And what these people were suggesting, or what they were saying, was that attached to that, it was the slaves who wrote that. They actually came out of Spain and Portugal. Okay. And so that, like I said, we're going to be talking about that in the next video, as far as like Spain and Portugal and all of that. But so, yeah, that's what it was all connected to. So, I mean, when, individual and other individuals, I'm sure they did the video, they went down there and treated it like, oh, this church is hallowed ground, and it just, they wrote down here and, whatever it was that I think it was grasp hold of Yah with a bass voice. Anyway, I don't, but that's what they came up with. And so they, what was it? So anyway, so this whole church, and from, the windows and how it was built and all this other stuff. Oh, this holy slaves were here, right? Well, like I said, if you saw that last video, if you saw the post, it went through the whole process, and basically nobody in academia can even confirm what's on the pews. However, it has definitely been confirmed that what is on the floor is a Congo cosmogram. It's from Congo. In fact, there were so many slaves that were going through that church, Congo slaves that were going through that church. They actually drilled into the floor of the church a cosmogram, and we talked a little bit about it. One day we'll do a video on that. We're just going to take our time with that one. But yeah, they drilled it in the floor, right? So now all of a sudden, now it's, it's bad now. Everything, the cosmogram. Oh my goodness. Don't you know what that is? And now all of a sudden the historical site now, oh my goodness, is radioactive now. And so, and what I mean by that is, if you were to listen to the people, let's say in the Congo itself, there are so many people who call on the Most High by the name of Nzambi. Okay, they use the name Nzambi. And we've actually done videos on that and explained what that was. And, and basically it's another name for the Most High. That's what it is. And if you would like to know, you can go and scroll back to some videos where we've actually talked about that in great detail. And so, yeah, that's what it is. Now, have other people taken that name and used it for other nefarious reasons? Absolutely. Just like they have taken the name God. Look on your dollar. Look on your money. If you're here in the U.S., it says one nation under God. Do you think they're talking about the Most High? No. in voodoo, in other languages as well. Voodoo, they use elements of the Christian church. You have crosses and things like that, other elements of the Christian church, that as well. In fact, the name God comes from Ayah, or Ayah, I-A-H, which is an Egyptian god. So, I mean, if we're going to be very specific on this on one side, then you got to be consistent and bring that over to the other side as well. Does that mean that you're calling on a foreign god if you say the name Yah? No. Again, go to I'm going to say Ezekiel, Exodus 6:3-4, where the Most High said, hey, listen, he established a covenant with Abraham. Now, keep in mind, Abraham came out of a household that was full of many gods. He didn't worship them. So, but all he knew was that there was one that was above all of them. That's it. Didn't even know his name. And yet the Most High saw what was in him, and it was so pure and holy, he established a covenant that we're actually living in to this day. And so, like I said, again, from this point, we don't get hung up on the names and all that stuff. I mean, obviously, if you're calling on Buddha and Muhammad and some of these other things, we can sidebar that and have a discussion on that. But all in all, at the end of the day, the Most High is looking in here. That's what he's looking in your heart. You understand? And so anyway, and again, for those who don't take the time to listen, remember the scripture when the people came up to the Most High and they said, Lord, Lord, haven't we done this? Haven't we done that in your name? And what did he say? Depart from me. I never knew you. So there are going to be people who are going to claim to know his name, but at the end of the day, he's going to say, I never knew you. It's simple as that. And so, I just wanted to share that. But I want to share this with you, too, as well, before we get into that. If you're also curious about this Nzambi thing, ooh, scary, do a search on YouTube for Nzambi. All you got to do is type it. And what you're going to come up with is a lot of voodoo. No, you're not. Actually going to come up with a bunch of praise and worship songs, a whole lot of gospel praise and worship songs. So when we have people here in the States who have the gall and the audacity and the pride and the arrogance to suggest that these people are all off and are in some witchcraft, that's quite telling. And it leaves, and it basically explains a whole lot why there is such a wedge between us here in the West and those in the on the continent of Africa. When you have these silly, unresearched viewpoints that are being put out here. I'm scrolling, family. That's all I'm doing. All of this most of these are all gospel songs. Okay, this is how they address the Most High over there. That's them. Okay, and so like I said, if you want to know, all you have to do is ask somebody that's over there. Don't just, like we always tell you on our platform, don't take our word for it. Always go to the source, and there you go. So I just wanted to show people that, how simple and easy it is. And, if you choose not to just do a simple search like that, then that's on you. It's just as simple as that. You can't make people do you can't make people do anything. It's, you give them the information and you keep it moving. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. What we're going to be talking about. Like I said, we're going to be wrapping up Juda, okay, the kingdom of Juda. And it's not going to be too much information here, but it's all coming from, not there. It's all going to come from a single source on this particular video, okay? And because this is one document. Juda, there's quite a bit of information on there, but it's so scattered. And it's because of the fact that this was really... How can I say this? It's one of I'm not saying slavery started here. Certainly not. That part of the continent, Juda, the kingdom of Juda, then you had the kingdom of Dahomey. It was in Guinea, of course. In that area, when you're going back so far, like the 1500s, the 1600s, it was so early. If you look at those old maps, right? When you look at those old maps and you notice, and I showed you this, I think, in a recent video, how the coastlines are very detailed, right? With a lot of information, but the interior, not so much. And so that's how a lot of the documentation is, it reflects that, you know what I mean? So there's not a whole lot of information. It's kind of scattered when it comes to places like Juda and all of that, in the early stages, right? But over time, as you get a little bit later on, then you start getting a little bit more information. But by that time, slavery is just about over. And then, slavery ended in, what's known today as Benin. Slavery ended in 1852. So after that, then you start getting a lot more information. And so, but yeah, so the information when it comes to Juda and slavery, it's not a whole lot, but there's enough out there for us to kind of get a good understanding of what the kingdom of Juda really was, and as we established in that video, this was not the kingdom of Judah as in the Bible. No, it's certainly not that at all, and like I said, just to reiterate, the people who have gone before us, and particularly we were talking about Pastor, it's been a long day, family, Pastor Darby, who, and others who did teach that was the kingdom of Judah. He was teaching in what he knew. That's what he knew at that time. And but it helped us to kind of orient ourselves into the direction that we need to look in. So we don't look at him in any kind of disrespect or anything like that. Like I'm saying the same thing I said in the other video. We're very grateful for the foundation that he did lay, because he did help us to kind of reorient where we need to look to learn about our people. So we all know in part and we prophesy in part, and he helped lay a foundation that's helped many of us included. So anyway, so now that we kind of are learning a little bit more, it's really helping us to kind of fine tune things a little bit more about what we know, right? All right, so let's go in, and the name of this document here is The Common People Were Divided: Monarchy, Aristocracy, and the Political Factionalism in the Kingdom of Juda. And this is going to cover from 1671 to 1727. I already have the parts I want to highlighted, so we're not going to go into everything. Robin Law is a professor emeritus at University of Stirling in Scotland, and his specialty is all in this area, in this pre-colonial era of West Africa. So you can look him up, and this is his specialty, is in this area here. So anyway, let's kind of scroll through here and let me get to my highlighted parts here. And yeah, there you go. So let me get to the first one here. Okay, I think that's the first one. Okay. What I'm skipping over, just so that you know, it kind of lays the foundation of Juda. It talks a little bit about the kings, the early king, the one of the kings that they talked about. I think he was 14 years old. It's just really like initiated. It's the initial contact between Europe and the kingdom of Juda, and then there's another kingdom there. I think it's Alda, if I believe. We'll hit it in a moment. And it's just giving you that initial. It's just talking about that initial contact. It's not really talking about at what we are wanting to focus on here, but you're more than welcome, find this document, and like I said, I'll try to make these things available to you, and you're more than welcome to take a look at all of this. Okay. And but yeah, it's like here it talks about the Juda kingdom. I'll just read a little bit. It says the origins and the early history of the Juda kingdom is obscure, and their reconstruction is complicated by the fact that two principal communities were comprised it. The capital city of Savi and the coastal port of Glehu apparently had distinct origins. Of Glehu was a settlement of the Hula people, distant from although linguistically and culturally related to the Juda people. The Juda, all right? The Juda was a people, all right? It wasn't Judah, okay? It wasn't that. And just to recap that, again, the reason why on the map it says Judah, Juda, is because these silly behind Europeans, that when they first got in there into that area, they were like, what? Who are you? And the people they were pronouncing, it was like, Judah, okay, and then write it. And because if you look at the maps from year to year to year, you'll see that it goes from Juda, spelt with a W, then it goes to Judah, Juda, then it's WHDIA or something. It goes through different spellings, and we went through that in that last video we talked about. And so, yeah, it's just a constant misspelling based on the people who were doing the maps and where they were from. You had the Portuguese, you had the Portuguese, sorry, and you also had the French that was in that area. And you could tell the French had an imprint on the name because it's actually spelled, I think even to this day, the city. But now it's called that. It's not the Kingdom of Juda now. Now it's Benin. And one of the major cities in Benin is Ouida, as in Ouida. Not, I don't think there's an H at the end. It might be an H at the end. But yeah, and OUI, of course, that comes straight from the French. But anyway, so this first part, it basically kind of lays the foundation, early history of it. And they tell you up front that, some of it, because it's kind of scattered, getting some of this information, they let you know that they kind of piece some things together there. So it doesn't make it inaccurate. It just, it just jumps from a couple of things there. That's all. So anyway, you could, like I said, again, you can look it up for yourself and you can check it out. Anyway, let's get into this. Okay. All right. So let me start here. I'm going to read the European impact in Ouida. Let me make this bigger so hopefully you can see it. Okay. The functioning of the political system of Ouida in the late 17th and early 18th centuries has also to be related to the growth and operation of the European trade in slaves during that period. Although the Portuguese had apparently done some trade in Ouida in the early 17th century, the real takeoff of the slave trade began in 1671, when the French transferred their, principal trading lodge from Afra and Olada to Glehu, the port of Ouida, Ouida Kingdom. By 1681, English merchants were also trading in Ouida, and the English Royal African Company transferred its main factory from Afra to Glehu in the following year. By 1686, the volume of slave exports from Glehu was already estimated to be 4 times that of Afra. When Afra was destroyed in a local war in 1692, the Dutch also transferred their activities to Ouida, and the trade became even more effectively concentrated in Glehu. The Ouida slave trade reached its peak in the early 18th century, when exports averaged between 15,000 and 20,000 annually. Ouida's commercial success was somewhat precarious. However, since the great majority of slaves it exported were obtained from the interior, especially from its own rival Alda. In consequence, it will be seen below, its trade was extremely vulnerable to disruption through political disputes or with its neighbors. And one of its neighbors, of course, it was Alada, and then also the Dahomey, the kingdom of Dahomey. And so between Afra, they just fought against each other, like, we're going to get the slaves. No, I'm going to get the slaves. No, we're going to get the slaves. So they were all fighting over this. Right. And so where did they get the slaves? They mentioned that they in the other writings that we referred to, they went into the interior, further into the interior of Africa, and they got these slaves. Sometimes it was through war or other things. They just went in there and just stole folks, and so that's how they obtained the slaves. And these kingdoms that you see on that map, like the kingdom of Ouida, the kingdom of the kingdom of Dahomey and all of that, they fought against each other in order to who's going to get which slaves. That's how it worked there at that time. Anyway, let's jump to this next one. Direct intervention by Europeans was probably less important in its effects upon local politics than the wealth derived from their trade. In general, the operation of the European trade in Ouida probably tended to strengthen the power of the king, since he asserted close control over and privileged position within it. Now listen to this, okay? Let me go back again. Let me start from the beginning. Direct intervention by Europeans was probably less important in its effects upon local politics than wealth derived from their trade. Now, when it says their trade, it didn't start off with slaves. We talked about this because initially when the Europeans came, they weren't really interested in slaves. What they were really interested in is in the gold and, and sugar. And I'm trying to think what was some of the other things that they, definitely gold, sugar. It was something else. I can't think of it right now, but just rum, just some of the stuff that some of these, I slipped my mind. But anyway, there was just some of the natural resources, that they were interested in. Or spices. I think that's what I was thinking of. Some of the spices and stuff like that. That's what they were interested in. They weren't really interested in slaves when the Portuguese and all that first came here. Remember, they had to be convinced. It was like, oh, snap, wait a minute. You mean we can, all right, y'all got this many folk down here? That's kind of how it was. And it was like, okay, we'll get into this. Okay. So when they talk about trade, it's not just slaves. It was also other things as well. Okay. All right. So let's see. Where was I? In their trade. In general, the operation of the European trade in Juda probably tended to strengthen the power of the king, since he asserted close control over and a privileged position within it. Now, listen, he benefited from the trade through taxation, receiving both substantial payments called customs from the European merchants for permission to trade and an export duty on each slave sold to them. OK, so here's the king of Juda, who's basically making something off of the top of every slave, and also enjoyed the right to sell his own slaves first, before anybody else could trade, and at a higher prices. Again, this is the king of Juda doing this. All right. The control exercised by the king over the trade, however, fell far short of monopoly, and the Juda chiefs were not excluded from its benefits. So the chiefs, they were getting broken off too. The slaves taken in Juda's own wars were not appropriated by the king, as was the case later in Dahomey, but belonged to those who captured them, so that the chiefs could obtain captives for sale to the Europeans through their control of the kingdom's armed forces. All right, you hearing this? I hope you're hearing this. The trade in slaves purchased from the interior for resale to the Europeans, which made up the greater part of the Juda trade, seems also to have been open to all. Even the tax revenue from the trade did not go exclusively to the king. By the 1690s, if not earlier, the king shared control over the trade with an official called the Yevogan, or captain of white men. Anyway, so yeah, that's this Yevogan. Under the Yevogan, there was also an official called the Agu, described as the interpreter, and separate captains assigned to each of the European factories, who collected the king's export duties. All of these officials received a share of, the customs paid by European traders, though the greater part, over 3/4, went to the king. So again, let's stop here for a second. So what we just read here was that the king and the chiefs had an arrangement with the Europeans when it came down. It was slaves. I mean, like you read in that latter part, slaves became a greater part of the trade, but there was also other pieces as well. But the king and the chiefs were basically, and they said just about anybody else, if you catch a slave, it's yours. You can sell it to the Europeans and all that stuff. So this is what the kingdom of Juda was about. This is what they built their economy on with the Europeans, is the selling of slaves. And so again, I pose the question. I'll take a commercial break and pose the question to you, for you as the viewer. You have to tell us, where in scripture do you find Judah? Because what people are saying is that the kingdom of Juda is Judah, as in the Bible. How does that line up with scripture when it talks about us being scattered to the four corners, being sent to Egypt again by ships? Does it say anything about Judah selling itself into slavery? There's nowhere in scripture you'll find that. I was going a little bit back and forth with somebody. Anytime if you see me doing that in the comment section, I'm just trying to, hoping and I'm praying that they begin to start thinking. I had one person that was saying, well, they use the example of Joseph, being sold into slavery by his brothers. I said, okay, yeah, I understand that. But we're not talking about Joseph here. We're talking about Judah. Judah was the one that was sold into slavery. So again, show me a biblical precedent where a brother of one of the sons of Israel basically beat himself up and said, I'm going to beat you up and I'm going to sell myself into slavery. Where do you see anything like that? There's no argument that, that Israel, the different brothers of Israel didn't fight against one another. I mean, please, we know this. But I'm specifically talking about Judah, since this is the kingdom of Judah that's been established by our Hebrew researchers. Where do we find in scripture where Judah sold itself into slavery? Okay, one more time. Kingdom of Juda is being alleged to be the kingdom of Judah, as in the Bible. Where do we find in scripture? If that's the case, then what we just learned here is that Judah, in fact, I guess, experienced some schizophrenia and just decided to sell its own self into slavery. But what we just also learned, too, is that they weren't selling their own people into slavery. They were going into the interior, into other areas and selling people. OK, so those that were there, they were all about selling of slaves and anything else and working with the white man. But the slaves that they obtained and sold into slavery, those slaves actually came from the interior, outside of the kingdom. Okay. All right, let's go to this. In the late 17th century, relations between Alada and Juda were further complicated by their growing commercial rivalry. The original transfer of the French trading lines from Afra and Alada to Glehu in Juda in 1671 was done with the encouragement of the king of Alada, because Afra was then in rebellion against them, and he is said to have diverted his own supplies of slaves for sale through Juda. You hear this? Okay. The dispute between Alada and Afra may have continued through the 1670s, but in 1680, the rulers of the two places were reported to have made peace. This presumably involved the resumption of slave supplies from Alada to Afra. And again, these are all like in close proximity of each other. I'm sorry. Let me see where it was. Okay, Afra. But whether this implied a breach of relations between Alada and Juda is not clear. When in 1681, the English began trading at Juda, the governor of Afra initially objected and indirected trade to Juda, but he eventually relented and allowed slaves to be supplied from Afra to Juda for the English. Later in the same year, there were further tensions, but in November of 1681, the kings of Alada and Juda both sent representatives to Afra to conclude a former peace with its governor. Okay, so again, you're hearing about some of the friction between these kingdoms over these slaves. Okay, so there you go. So let's see what else I have here. Okay, here we go. Let's jump down here. The king of Alada, in turn, called in a mercenary army from Little Popo, west of Juda, which not only destroyed Afra, but also in 1692 invaded and ravaged Juda before retiring. Alada and Juda apparently remained formally at war through the 1690s. In 1698, the kings of two states were said still to live in perpetual enmity, though no actual fighting was then taking place, and were still disputing possession of the site of Afra, each being desirous to appoint his viceroy. Although trade between Alada and Juda was normally open, and most of the slaves sold at the latter were supplied through the former, the king of Alada very commonly closed the paths to Juda by a very strict prohibition in order to favor the trade at Jachin, which had replaced Afra as the principal port in his own kingdom. So this is just giving us some insight on how these, how they were fighting against one another over these slaves. Because, there's money on the table there, and they looking at how these Europeans, how they were just coming in and just scooping the amount of money they were dropping on the table. They was like, man, hold up, man, So you had all that friction there. I don't think I have anything else. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. But yeah, so that was pretty much it, because like I told you, and this goes into, it continues to talk about what I'm like kind of breezing through here. It basically now is just really going into the, how these different kingdoms begin to go on the incline, or decline, I should say, over time, over all this. And then, of course, the Europeans came in and said, okay, all right, let's go in and now let's clean up. That's basically what it's saying in a nutshell. That's kind of what you see me talking about. So, because the next thing that happened was the homie rose up and they were like, okay, let's come in. We're going to take over we're going to take care of Juda, and we're going to take this whole area. So that's where the homie start rising up after, these other areas start fighting one another. But yeah, but that's it. That's all. But again, the name of this document here is The Common People Were Divided, Monarchy, Aristocracy, and Political Factionism in the Kingdom of Juda. And again, the author of this is Robin Law, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Scotland, Stirling University of Stirling in Scotland. Sorry. And and this is his specialty. He goes into most of his studies is concentrated here in the pre-colonial era of at West Africa. So let me see. I'm just going through back to the beginning here and making sure that's it. Well, there you go. But yeah, that's it. That's it, family. So hopefully you got something out of that. And like I said, it, and you can go through documents like this and others, but there's nothing in here at all that even mentions about them being the tribe of Judah. Nothing at all. And like I said, again, we looked through this whole document. We've looked, and if you look at the other videos we've done, we've looked at other documents as well. And outside of the little clips that people post on social media, you have to go to those actual books. Where is the source? Where did you get this from? Okay, now let me read the page before, let me read the page after, so that I can get full context of what's being said. And we're going to give a demonstration of that in our next video when we're talking about the Sephardics. And you're going to see, man, our people really got it wrong when it comes to the Sephardics, because what is being said is that we are the descendants of these people. And I've been telling you, if you follow this platform, I've been saying over and over again, that is not true. That does not stand up to academic scrutiny. It doesn't. You can't pick one book up and take a little clip and then build a whole case around it. No, you got, and the other thing to keep in mind is just because the book was written, like I've said before, it was written in 1290 or 1460 or whatever, you can't, that's not again, just because what that book or that source oftentimes was written by one person, right? If you want to get a full picture and you want to make sure you're getting confirmation from multiple sources around that same time so that you can be really confirmed. You don't just build a case around one book. Like in this video here, like, some people say, well, you just use one source here. This is on top of, this is actually a part 2 to a video that we did where we use multiple sources. So I just came across this document here, and I thought this was a great way to kind of wind up at least this part of the discussion as it relates to the kingdom of Juda. So yeah, so I would really encourage our people, if you haven't seen the video that we did right before this one, please take the time and watch that, because it really lays out what is a very good approach that we as Israel should take when it comes to our history. It's something that we can't take lightly. We can't just skim through and all this other stuff. I'll be the first to admit to you, I know my videos are very boring. I don't have graphics flying around. I put some music in the beginning. I might put some in the end, but there's a lot of reading when we do this, and this is how we learn. This is how you get context in any, when you're looking at history. So, that's what you could, that's all you can do at the end. So hopefully you got something out of this, family. And yeah, that's it. I think we're done. And yeah, we will be doing the next video, Yah willing, we'll be dealing with the Sephardics of Spain, coming out of Spain and Portugal. We're going to be looking at where did they come from. As far as skin tone, we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at some other things. How were they treated? How were these Sephardics treated when they came into the continent? Were they welcomed with open arms, or were they kind of like, we don't know you? Well, you'll find out when we do that next video. Family, thank you so much. You guys take care, and we'll be talking again soon. Take care. Love you very much. Take care.